Mike Tomlin had a lot to say in his press conference after the Steelers went over the Buccaneers. He's not satisfied, and the team isn't satisfied with where they are 2-4. But there were some interesting components there. One, he addressed but didn't address the Diontae Johnson, Mitch Trubisky story that they fought in the middle of the Jets game, and how if that led to Kenny Pickett starting. But we also got to talk to him about Najee Harris, and we also want to look at Chase Claypool being used in the middle of the field in that game. Is that something the Steelers can replicate? All things offense, it's going to be a big discussion. I've got Mike DeFabo from The Athletic, the Steelers beat reporter from The Athletic, here breaking it down with me on Locked On Steelers. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things of the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you enjoy this show on YouTube, like the video if you're seeing it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedon. NFL. We'll get more from that later. Joining him, as I said earlier, he returns to the show, Mike DeFabo, Steelers beat reporter for The Athletic. Mike, how's it going?
Hey, I'm doing great. You do such a good job of talking fast like that. Like, you might be able to get a job doing those disclaimers at the end of those sketchy medicine ads. What do you think?
I could definitely do that. I could definitely. We have had people in the YouTube comment section of this show say Chris Carter is the Twista of Locked On, of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I could rap. I could practice. It would take practice because, again, I do this show every day, so that's why I can say that so fast. But if I practiced it well enough, I could speak that fast. So thank you, Mike. But I wanted to talk to you leading off with, we were both at the Mike Tomlin press conference, and right before the end, our friend Brooke Pryor from ESPN addressed him about the story from Jerry Dulac about the whole, Mitch Trubisky and Diontae Johnson. They had a yelling argument in the middle of the Jets game at halftime, and that after that is when Kenny Pickett was announced as the guy who was taking over the starting position. But here's the thing about this, Mike. I want to point this out because in that article, if you read it carefully, Jerry does not say that Kenny Pickett took the job because of that argument. He simply said it happened afterwards. And there's been a lot of assumptions made on the internet that was the case. And I thought it was interesting how Mike Tomlin, when asked about this, he addressed it, but he didn't address it. We're going to play the clip so that y'all can see how he was on Tuesday when asked about it at the Steelers practice facility.
Anyone else?
Mike, there's a report that there was an argument.
Ryan Clark?
No, actually not
Okay.
this time. That there was an argument between Diontae Johnson and Mitch Trubisky in the locker room that happened at the Jets game, and that led to what was a factor in Kenny starting. Is there any truth to that, or was that something that did transpire?
If it were, do you think that I would share with you in this environment? Probably not. Our business is our business, and I understand in today's climate, oftentimes there's leaks our business get in the street, but I'm not going to, I'm not going to acknowledge it or confirm it or deny it in these settings. I'm just not. I ain't got enough hours of my day for it. The things that happen among collectives from time to time is normal business. Everyone wants to win. If it transpired, it's good. It probably means there's a couple guys that wanted to win. If it didn't transpire, it probably means that it should have, because we are aggressively pursuing victory. And sometimes that's emotional.
So, Mike Tomlin came out here and was like, I will neither confirm nor deny, but if it was good, if it happened, good. It means they mattered. If it didn't, well, maybe that was one of the funniest answers he gave, because he also said, like, if it actually did happen, do you think I'd tell you right here, like if I was gonna say it? But in that response, I think Mike is trying to just diffuse and just smoke screen the whole situation, because like he doesn't want us to see on the inside. But you heard that. You've seen the story. You've been in the locker room. What's your sense of like how this has actually played into anything the Steelers have decided on moving forward?
Well, first of all, the way that he answered it, basically without confirming it, he confirmed that there was some type of disagreement.
Right.
If nothing happened, he would have come out and said, yeah, I wanted to address that. That's a bogus report, completely inaccurate. But the fact that he acknowledged not only, yeah, that's a possibility, but also sometimes that's a good thing in a locker room when you have that fire and that passion and a little bit of competitive butting of heads. So, yes, I think I look at it and I say something happened. Now, to take it a step further, did that ultimately weigh into his decision to move on to Kenny Pickett? And I think that that's where maybe there's my biggest question mark, and I don't think it's something that's ever going to get answered. But I guess, this is speculation, right? Like Mike Tomlin's not going to tell us, so all we have to rely on is like logic and reason and speculation. I think Mike Tomlin is sitting there. He's watching the Steelers offense get booed off the field.
Mm-hmm.
They're chanting Kenny Pickett's name. There's about to be a riot at Heinz Field or whatever they call it nowadays, looking for Kenny Pickett to start. Okay. The offense was horrible to watch. If you were paying money to be there, you might have left at halftime. I think that he looked at that, and not only then did he see dysfunction on the field, he goes into the locker room and sees dysfunction spilling over in terms of two of the most prominent players in the offense butting heads. And he said, enough is enough. I've seen enough. I'm ready to move on to the next chapter of what this offense is going to be this season. So, I guess the way that I would sum it up is, in my mind, I imagine that it played some factor, but I feel like the fact that the Steelers were so ineffective moving the football, that Mitch Trubisky seemed unwilling to take chances, and that it reached a point that his receivers were about to mutiny this man. He was like, enough is enough. I'm going to put in the rookie that I said I wasn't going to play and who hasn't received a first-team rep all of the regular season. And that's kind of the way that I interpret it. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I'm with you. I think that honestly, the decision probably came before this fight even happened. I think that was just more of like maybe I'm like if I was questioning my decision, this kind of sealed it, because you and I were there. George Pickens wasn't happy. And if there was an explosion from Diontae Johnson, it was after weeks of not saying nothing bad about Mitch Trubisky after being wide open. Like I'll never forget the 2-minute drill against the Browns, and the Steelers are moving the ball, and then Diontae Johnson is wide open, like right around the start of the red zone, and he's just sitting there doing jumping jacks, and Mitch Trubisky throws the ball away, and Deontay's just like, why? And like you just see the visible frustration in his body language on the replay. Like you don't even need all 22. It was just there for the national audience to see. And you didn't hear, and that week, you didn't hear him come out and bash Mitch Trubisky and say, "Oh, this guy's killing us," or say anything like that, or throw a water cooler at him or something like that. The Steelers receivers, they were lining up, they were trying to be good teammates. But it's obvious, and I think this was Mike Tomlin's point: if you want to win, your emotions should get you to say something when you're struggling, because again, it's not like the Steelers, were 4-1 in that situation. They were in the middle of what would become a 4-game losing streak. So emotions are going to boil up, and that means, because again, Mike Tomlin sees that as a want to win. So I don't think that that fight directly got Kenny Pickett to start at all. I think that it was a symptom of the things that led to that what got Kenny Pickett there, and that was just the ineffectiveness of the offense. Now, I will say this, and I want to get your opinion on this too. I said yesterday on the show, on the Monday version of the show, or the Tuesday version of the show. Excuse me. I said on the Tuesday version of the show that went up, Kenny Pickett was still QB1 of this offense. Some people were questioning that because Mitch Trubisky finished the game strong. Mike Tomlin said as much in that press conference as well. He said, he said, if Kenny Pickett is healthy to play, he's going to play. Is that the right move in your mind, Mike, or should they be riding a hot hand? What do you see there?
Yeah, it's tough. I can kind of see it both ways, to be honest. And maybe I'll just lay it out the way that I see it. On one hand, you're a team that has just 2 wins on the season, and you've struggled to move the ball offensively. And, Mitch Trubisky is the guy that led you down and scored that touchdown that resulted in beating Tom Brady and the Bucs. Does he not deserve an opportunity now to continue to ride that hot hand? And then for me, maybe the biggest X factor in this decision-making process is practice reps.
Yep.
So Kenny Pickett, to this point, he has received 6 total practices with the first team offense. So Mike Tomlin chose to take this conservative approach. He started him as the third quarterback on the depth chart in training camp, brought him along slowly, and then, as we're alluding to, out of nowhere, just all of a sudden jumps to him in the middle of the Jets game.
Mm-hmm.
And then that next practice, the following, I guess they don't practice on Mondays really, next Wednesday is when Kenny Pickett finally got his first reps with the first team. And so if due to this concussion, he's unable to practice and continue to establish chemistry, camaraderie, then I would say it does make sense to move to Mitch. However, what we heard from Mike Tomlin today was they anticipate that Mitch will not be limited in practice. And even though
Kenny won't be limited.
Or Kenny, sorry.
I got you.
Thank you for correcting me, Chris. This is why you're a real pro. Kenny Pickett will not be limited. So to me, that's what changes the discussion, because at that point, if he does get the opportunity to practice and see some of these looks and continue to develop chemistry with his receivers, then I think the discussion is a little bit different. So, and then the overriding factor in all of this is the big picture. And you look at the Steelers at 2-4 right now. They're going to have to crawl their way back to even become what Mike Tomlin says respectability. Right now, they are bottom of the basement. They're a team that people are talking about maybe having a top 5 pick. So if that is the case, it's also worth looking ahead to the future and saying, this is a lost year. Our primary and singular objective should be to develop Kenny Pickett, get him live game reps, get him ready so that next year when we're in a much better position, we have a quarterback with experience and we know the guy. So going into week 7, you're not asking questions about who the quarterback is. We already have the answer. It doesn't even need to be asked because of that. So that's kind of the way that I look at that. The dynamic is Kenny Pickett available, number one, which there's a big question mark around that, because you figure that of the quarterbacks who've sustained concussions this season, like legitimately other than Tua, none have come back the following week. Of the Steelers who've been diagnosed with concussions since the Tua incident, there have been 3. None have come back the following week. So, even though Tomlin's optimistic, I still have my own questions. So is Kenny Pickett available, number one? Number 2, does he get the practice reps? And number 3, what's your point of the season? Are you still trying to figure out who's going to give you the best chance to win against the Miami Dolphins in week 7 of the 2022 season? Or are you looking, who is the guy and what puts us in the position to have success long-term and develop a quarterback?
Lots of big questions there, lots of important questions there, and things that we got to move forward. But I think you and I are on the same page. If Kenny Pickett practices this week, they'll play him. If he's not, they're not going to rush him. And you and I both know Mike Tomlin, he don't rush his guys back just because they might not be injured. He wants to make sure that they're healthy. He joked about Ryan Clark, basically, talking about the ESPN story about how Ryan Clark, quote unquote, came at him and was addressed there. But Ryan Clark was a guy who, had sickle cell disease and was put in a situation where his life would have been at risk if he had played in a playoff game. And Mike Tomlin refused to do so because he was going to protect him, because he said he would do that for his son. So he would do that for his players. We're not done talking about the offense. This is going to be an all offensive show because there's a lot to break down here. But I wanted to talk to Mike also about the offensive coordinator, how it works things in here, because I think there's some really interesting aspects of how the coordinator, how plays were called at the end of the game and what was executed at the end of the game. We'll talk about that in just a minute here. We also have another Mike Tomlin video coming up that I want to address with Mike. But first, we got to talk to you guys about our friends at LinkedIn. LinkedIn is, of course, the number one place that everyone goes to look for jobs. And if you're looking to hire new employees, it's the number one place for you to go to post your job. So you can go to LinkedIn Jobs right now and create a free job post in just minutes to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then just add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile, and that will spread the word fast that you're hiring, so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know that every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Mike DeFabo. Mike, we got to talk about the middle of the field because this was where the Steelers never used guys. They never, it was said that it was just Matt Canada didn't draw up plays to use the middle part of the field. And then at the end of the game there were guys being thrown to in the middle part of the field. And I guess I should say a guy because it was primarily one guy in that situation, and it was Chase Claypool. I got two charts I want to go over with you here to talk about this because, and then I also want to go over some numbers that you have from The Athletic, and we have some numbers from PFF that show interesting stuff with Chase Claypool and how he's being incorporated into this offense. And, before we get to the charts, let's get to those numbers. Mike, you were mentioning, off the air when we were talking about this in the show about the usage of him in the slot has just completely flipped. And I want you to share those numbers with our listeners if you can.
Yeah, so basically the bottom line is through Chase Claypool's first 2 seasons, he ran 741 routes from the outside, okay, and just 198 from the slot. Okay, so basically about 80% using my Greater Latrobe High School math. I did take AP Calculus in high school. I got a C in it.
You didn't need to put yourself out there like that. You could have said I took it. That was it.
Yeah. So take that for what it's worth. But the numbers are right here. Okay. So remember that. So basically 80% of the time he was on the outside through his first 2 seasons. This season, by contrast, the numbers have basically completely flipped, and he's become primarily a slot receiver. He has this season 177 routes from the slot. Compare that to just 42 not from the slot.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of playing a little bit of a different position. And at the same time, that also means that theoretically he should be targeting different portions of the field on some of these routes. And we saw it. I mean, he broke out in a big way with 7 catches on 7 targets. He caught the touchdown pass. And I mean, for a guy who definitely thinks highly of himself, and he in the offseason said that he believed he could be a top 3 receiver, this was definitely his breakout game of the season and looked a lot more like the Chase Claypool that fans, I'm sure, remember from his rookie season when he scored 9 touchdowns. And there was such optimism that, like, yep, the Steelers have done it again. They found a really good receiver outside of the first round. And since that, like, promising rookie season, he really hasn't built upon things. So, Sunday was definitely a big step in the right direction. And as you're talking about, where they're also targeting him showed an evolution in the offense as well.
Right. And I want to show this chart, and this is from Next Gen Stats NFL. I mean, you look at this passing chart. These are on all 7 of his targets, and of course, he caught all 7 of his targets. But everything is either in between the hash marks or in between the numbers here. He had one route where, well, I'll not say one thing. The one time he went outside the numbers down the sideline, that was that scramble play where Mitch Trubisky was just trying to buy time, keep a play alive, and he rolled to his left and he fired a pass to Claypool's back shoulder, and he made one of the best catches I think that he's made in his career, in my opinion, Mike. And that was the only time. That he caught that, but it was exclusively in the middle part of the field. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, I want to see this pass chart. And as you can see, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's all, crossing patterns, seam patterns, things that are allowing him to use his size and his speed. By the way, it was recorded that he was the 5th fastest ball carrier in the NFL this week, according to Next Gen Stats, when everything was getting tallied up. That's another sign to me that it's like, hey, like this makes sense to put him here. I know some people were begrudgingly like, I don't know, about this and all that, but I look at this and I say, man, this makes a lot of sense to put him here, and he was winning a lot. Now, Mike, I also want to show you and our viewers here on YouTube, and I will explain some of this, because these route trees, these are tough to explain, visually to our audio audience, but we can go over numbers here. And this is the Pro Football Focus chart for Mitch Trubisky in this game. And this is positioning where he's at. He threw no passes behind the line of scrimmage in this game. He threw 3 passes that were under 10 yards in this game, 2 to his left that were completed for 9 yards, 1 up the middle that was completed for 11 yards, the other one that fell incomplete. But the majority of his throws came in the middle part of the field, beyond 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. And when he threw there, he was 4 for 4 for 84 yards, a touchdown, no interceptions, and a perfect passer rating of 158.3. And Mike, we're saying all this to say, and now I'll take down this chart so we can be on the screen again, but we're saying all this to say, I've been saying for weeks, months, even years now, because Mike, this is Matt Canada's second year as offensive coordinator. The play calls are there to attack the middle part of the field. The opportunities are there. They just have to be taken. And I think we were kind of alluding to this with the whole Mitch Trubisky discussion, maybe taking his mental shackles off that he put on himself, as far as he can't afford to lose the situation. He can't afford to give up his spot to Kenny Pickett. Maybe with that pressure off, it's like he's already lost it. That unlocked it in his brain. He's like, you know what? I'm going to just sling it. I'm going to just let it go. I'm not going to play it safe. And now the parts of Matt Canada's offense that we thought that he wasn't calling, they've been there all along, and they're just the tip of the iceberg was starting to get unlocked there.
Yeah, I completely agree. I would love to know what Mitch Trubisky felt like he was supposed to do initially when he had the job the first 3.5 games, because it seemed to me like he was looking at it as a guy that thought, I have an elite defense, and my job is to be a game manager, and my job is to not lose games. And he was playing games not to lose, and they were losing anyway.
Yeah.
And it seemed, I completely agree, that it seemed to me like he came in and thought to himself, look, how many more opportunities am I going to have to even play quarterback in the NFL?
Right.
Like I don't know that Mitch Trubisky is going to start another game in the NFL.
Why not?
Because this was supposed to be kind of his last hurrah, his last chance to prove to the league after flaming out in Chicago, sitting behind Josh Allen in Buffalo, now getting this chance to start in Pittsburgh. Yeah, I am a starting quarterback, and it was the dysfunction of the Bears that led to my lack of success, not the fact that I'm not a good quarterback. So, I did think, especially what I liked was the touchdown, the 6-yard touchdown strike to Chase Claypool, and he just ripped it. And it was like, no hesitation. I know where I'm going with the football, and I'm just going to drill it in there. And sure enough, it worked. And so, it does appear that Kenny's going to get the job. But if Mitch does go back in the game, that's the Mitch Trubisky that the Steelers need. They don't have the defense that you can rely upon to suffocate opponents, the same way that they almost made it into the playoffs with Duck Hodges as their quarterback a couple years back, doing basically nothing more than not losing games. They need more than that. This defense is not what they thought it was going to be. They're going to need a quarterback to go up and put out points, and they are going to need Mitch to be, or whoever's under center, to be the quarterback that's not afraid to take some chances.
I agree. And I want to clarify, because I know what you're saying, and I don't want people to take it out of context. When you say put up points, you're not saying 30 points a game, but you're talking about just be efficient with the football. You can't win 16-13 each week. You got to win, get 24 points, get them leads to defend. And also don't go 3 and out all game while doing it. Don't just have a couple big plays here and there.
Right. No, absolutely. Like if there were some games there in the middle, in the middle stretch there before this one, where they were putting their defense in such horrible positions because of the time of possession and because of these 3 and outs, where the defense is on the field for 6 plus 7, 8 minutes against the Cleveland Browns, who are just a dominant physical running football team. And then they've got like 45 seconds rest and they're right back on the field again. So even if you aren't scoring points, you have to be able to effectively move the football. And it's not a coincidence that in the NFL, so many teams are passing teams. It's more efficient to throw the football than it is to run the football in the modern NFL. And so, for the Steelers to be an effective football team in 2022, they're going to have to be able to move the football through the air.
I agree. And again, it's just about, to me, it's about keeping, like you say, keeping the defense off the field, not letting them get tired, because I still say the biggest difference. And I asked Mike Tomlin this, and I didn't queue up this clip, but basically I asked Mike Tomlin, is part of what allowed your defense to be more aggressive the fact that they hadn't been on the field as much the last couple games? And he said it doesn't matter. And he gave the perfect Mike Tomlin.
Yeah,
I'm not giving nobody no excuses. Don't matter when we're asked. We got to go win as a defense. But I'm sorry. The two games that I think that they've looked the most rested was the season opener, and then after that, you saw them be tired of the second half of the Patriots game, the fourth quarter of the Jets game, all of the Brown. Well, I'd say this was the second half of the Browns game, because the first half they seemed fine, and then all of the Bills game. But in those last couple games that they played, including the Jets one, the time of possession started to eke back towards the Steelers in favor, or at least even out. And then you saw in this game, time of possession, the Buccaneers only won by 2 seconds, which means the defense got chances to rest. And I think I see that as two things that correlate to each other, in that the offense kept the defense off the field from being there all game, and the defense played its most detailed versions of football in those two in those two games. So I look at that and I see that as very much part of this. And I'm with you. They're going to need whoever it is, whether it's Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett. They cannot play scared. They have to take these shots. And on that touchdown that you're talking about, I broke this down on the Tuesday episode, but I want to break it down again on the Wednesday episode. Red zone possession. They go cover 3. They say, hey, you know what? The Steelers haven't thrown down the seams. And what do the Steelers do? They send Chase Claypool up the seam. Antoine Winfield sits on the flat, and Chase Claypool's left in the end zone. Mitch Trubisky doesn't hesitate. He just fires it in there. Claypool's open. If the Steelers start to do stuff like that, because Antoine Winfield in that situation, when he's sitting in the lower seam going to the flat, he's a safety that's also helping against the run. When you hit those seam patterns behind him, where often that's where the safety goes, that's where the slot corner goes, that's where the linebackers go, and those are the first guys that come up to help against the run, you force those guys into guessing games. You force them to hesitate, then their defense can't play fast, and then you can start to take advantage of it with your offense, and especially with the ground game. And we're going to get to that ground game in just a minute. Mike wrote about that, was writing about Najee Harris recently on The Athletic. And I asked Mike Tomlin a question about Najee Harris during his press conference. We're going to get to all of that in the third segment here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. So don't go anywhere. But first, we got to talk to you guys about our great sponsors at BetOnline. BetOnline is the number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. Find all the latest sports developments, including league reviews, news, including the Major League Baseball playoffs. It's getting crazier. The World Series is right around the corner. The Phillies are dominating. There's a lot of great action there, but also Week 7 in the NFL is here, and the NBA started up Wednesday night, and the NHL started up this week. It's just the best time of sports, baby. You get all the 4 majors in action, and you can bet on all of that at BetOnline, your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action when you visit BetOnline, where the game starts. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers. He is Mike DeFable of The Athletic. Mike, let's get into some Najee Harris talk. Now, before we get to Mike Tomlin's clip, I want to point out, an article or, an argument that you were putting out there for your readership at The Athletic about how Najee Harris, and I'm with you. We've talked about this off camera.
Yeah.
I've talked about this on camera. I've said this a lot of times. There are people out there that say that Najee Harris isn't running hard, that he doesn't know which holes to hit. And I will not deny there's times he misses a hole. It happens. But it is not nearly as frequent as some people try to make it seem. And plenty of the times the reason the Steelers' run game isn't getting going is because teams are flying to the line of scrimmage to stop him. They are selling out to stop him because they know that the Steelers aren't going to do the things like what Mitch Trubisky did with Chase Claypool, hitting him behind in the seam against the cover 3 down the middle, making Antoine Winfield look silly for coming up so far. The Steelers haven't done that consistently, and so teams don't fear it, and so they go after Najee Harris. And what happens is Najee Harris, by the time he gets the ball and he's 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage, he has to dodge two defensive linemen, a linebacker, maybe a safety, and then he's brought down. He gets 2 or 3 yards out of it, and Steelers fans look at that and they say, "Oh, he's not running hard." But the reason he's not running hard is because he's running into brick walls and he's having to dodge them, and he's having to try to do that just to keep a play alive. Whereas, when people see Jaylen Warren, they say, "Oh, he runs hard. Look at his yards per carry." Well, it's because the defense does not care when Jaylen Warren is on, and you basically wrote to that effect earlier.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we're having this discussion on this kind of a platform where we can have a more kind of nuanced conversation about detailed, because it's hard to articulate it in a tweet, and like on Twitter, people get angry and they double down, and it becomes like an argument versus a discussion. Okay.
Right.
Najee Harris, I asked him how he was feeling health-wise because he was limited with that Liz Frank sprain or sprain, injury, whatever in his foot.
Sure.
And he told me this week that he had been a steel plate was in his foot. And so he admitted that he didn't feel like he had the explosiveness. So I will acknowledge the fact that like there are instances where I felt like maybe Najee could have been more explosive and or could have hit a hole a little bit harder.
Sure.
But after putting out the stats that until last week, Najee Harris, according to these true media stats that we get, he was getting 0.7 yards before contact compared to Jaylen Warren getting 2.5. And my assertion was that on a very limited sample size, Jaylen Warren was getting better blocking. And people lit me up and they were like, "You don't know what you're talking about. You're crazy." I went back and I watched every single run of the Steelers season because I'm crazy like that. And and here's what I found. Okay. What I found was the instances when Jaylen Warren was getting the football, almost exclusively they were out of the shotgun. And they were runs going off tackle, where often the defense was in nickel. So just by sheer personnel or dime or some kind of sub package, by sheer personnel, they were not dedicating the same number of bodies. He was not seeing stacked boxes nearly as much. And like the way in which the Steelers ran the football, there's no denying if you looked at it that he had more running room just because he was around the edge.
The time.
Right. Okay. Compare that with the runs that Najee Harris, for the most part, was getting under center.
Yeah.
Often multiple tight ends in the formation, obvious running downs, obvious running formations. And sure enough, they gave him the football. And, these plays are getting blown up in a variety of different ways. And he's getting hit in the backfield. Like, I didn't just make up these numbers myself.
You didn't.
Right. So sure, there are instances where Najee Harris could, yes, maybe there are instances where he was a little hesitant. Maybe he doesn't have that burst because of the steel plate that he had in his shoe previously to this. But you watch those plays, and I don't care if you have Barry Sanders. There were instances where nobody was going to get a yard, no matter who they were. So, I just it's an interesting situation. I think that the Steelers do need to have more than just one running back. I like the fact that they have Jaylen Warren contributing because I've watched too many Steelers teams run the wheels off of running backs. I've seen LeGarrette Blount walk up to the football field because Mike Tomlin couldn't find a couple carries for him, and he walks right onto the Patriots roster and wins the Super Bowl. Yeah. I've watched Le'Veon Bell walk out the door for the Steelers because he felt like he had too much of a workload, and that was going to kind of hurt his chances in free agency. And, so I am 100% an advocate for having a variety of backs who have different strong skill sets, and you can feature them in different ways in your offense based on the down, the distance, the situation, the type of run, all those types of things. That said, I find this whole discussion that Jaylen Warren should be the feature back over Najee Harris.
That's where you lose me, man.
That's where it's wild to me when you just pull up one single stat and you say Jaylen Warren has 19 carries and this is his yards per carry. Najee Harris has these many carries and his yards per carry aren't the same. And based on that one stat, I'm ready to give up and sell my stock on a first-round draft pick. That's where you lose me.
Yeah. And again, this is not to slight Jaylen Warren. He's fighting.
I love the guy. I think he's a very, very good running back. And
yes.
I think that there's a chance that he could continue to carve out a niche beyond just this week or this season. I think he's a very effective back.
Right. And we're not slighting him. But Najee Harris, I do think is a special player and a special person. And if you think that dude doesn't put everything he has into this, you're not paying attention. And you're definitely not in the locker room like Mike and I are, because when Mike, you and I were there after this game against the Patriots, and you've been in more locker rooms this year because you're going on the road. But they beat the Buccaneers. I called them the Patriots because Tom Brady was there.
Tom Brady, yeah. I did the same thing, so it's okay.
It's tough, but the entire locker room is cleared out. You and I have interviewed like 20 different Steelers at this point, and we're just looking around to see if we're missing anybody. As we're walking out, Najee Harris is the last Steeler there. He's sitting in his locker room. He hasn't budged. He still has his shoulder pads on. He still has his jersey on. He still has his leg pads on, and still has his cleats on. His cleats haven't even been taken off.
Right.
And Mike Tomlin says, Najee, go get a shower. We need you to rest.
Right.
And he's like, Coach.
Yeah, he's like, don't be here all day.
Right. He's like, don't be here all day. He's like, Coach, I'm taking it in. I'm taking in the win. And Coach Tomlin's just like, man, that guy's crazy. Well, I asked Mike Tomlin just to speak on that, because that don't happen too often. And here was Mike Tomlin when I asked him that in Tuesday's press conference.
After the win, saw Najee Harris sitting there in his pads when pretty much everyone else had cleared out, and you told him, like, hey, Najee, we need you to go get showers and get some rest. What goes into his mindset that he's got to take things in so much when he?
That's routine for him. Win or lose, he's always the last out. He's always reflecting and thinking about what transpired and trying to learn and grow from the experiences that transpired. He's a young guy, but he's still called to be a leader. He understands the gravity of where he is and the responsibilities that come with being him, and he's just always trying to get better, and that's just a component of his get better.
Is that something that you see that resonates with his teammates? Like, they see that?
I don't know that his teammates hang around long enough to really witness some of it, to be quite honest with you. It's usually me and him, because it's usually me and him.
Mike, you tempered your praise.
So I mean, first of all, that's hilarious. He's like, I don't know it resonates because he's there so long that they don't see him. But again, this is a dude, he takes it in. And Mike, and you pointed this out on the road. I saw this in the losses to the Patriots at home and the Jets at home. He did the same thing with the losses. He wasn't just taking in the win. He was taking in the losses. He was absorbing it, feeling it in. And you said he does this on the road too. When they got to get on a flight, they got to get on a flight or a bus to get back to home. And he's sitting there like, nope, I'm absorbing every minute of this, whether it's a win or a loss. To me, that speaks volumes to how serious he takes this, how serious he has to take his preparation, and that what he's going through right now isn't about him not wanting to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. He definitely cares. The scene that stuck out to me was just a week earlier. It was very similar, but also the opposite, where the Steelers had just, in Mike Tomlin's words, gotten smashed against Buffalo Bills. And Najee, instead of being like, oh, I'm so excited, I want to just enjoy the game that I just played, he had 1.8 yards per carry. It was one of the worst performances of his young career, 11 carries for 20 yards. And he was like, his head was in his hands and his dreads were covering his face. He was clearly distraught. Tomlin kind of saddled up next to him, put his hand there, talking to him a bit. So that scene stuck out to me. It also stuck out to me that later on this week, Najee talked about how there's different expectations with being a first-round draft pick, and he's like, I embrace that. In a similar way that like we're looking at Jaylen Warren, everyone's thrilled. Okay, here's a guy that was undrafted. They found him off the street. Now he's a productive guy. They're excited about it. But that's different than a first-round draft pick. The same way that when Terrell Edmonds came in, if he was a fourth-round draft pick or a third-round draft pick, people would have thought, yeah, he's a solid member of the secondary. But when he came in as a first-round draft pick, you wanted him to be the next Troy Polamalu, okay, when you draft a safety that high. So that's I think what's something that with a level of maturity that Najee understands. And he understands that like he needs to be a difference-making kind of back. He needs to not just be the guy that gets what the offensive line blocks for him. He's the guy that proves that I am special, and that when the rest of the league has devalued the running back position, he was so transcendent in his talents that it made sense for the Steelers to expend a very valuable first-round draft pick on him. So, I mean, I've been impressed with the way that Najee handles himself, and I'm really intrigued to see where his season goes, because he's not denying the fact that it's not started the way he's wanted. Some of that's his own doing, some of that's injury, some of that's offensive line. No matter what the factor is, he's willing to put it on his own shoulders and accept the responsibility. Now, how does his season evolve? Does he get healthier? Does the offensive line get better? And do we see this guy that the Steelers felt like was worth that first-round draft pick?
It's a good question, and there's a lot of those good questions right now, Mike. I think that Najee Harris is, I think that guy is very talented. I think he's going to figure it out. I think part of it's also the offensive line figuring out. I think also it's the passing game figuring out, because it's not just being enough to throw the ball. You have to back up those safeties, those linebackers to stop them, because it's not just lining up, loading up the box. It's, if they put 7 in the box, but 2 extra guys are flying up to the line of scrimmage from outside the box, it's the same thing as putting 9 or 10 in the box. Like it's just about how defenses are responding. Again, you watch the tape, I watch the tape, we see it. I think that there is potential there, but he needs help, and I think he needs to keep going at it, just like the rest of this offense does. There's potential here. And I'm not saying that this offense is going to turn into a top unit in the NFL, but you saw, as we went over with Chase Claypool, he can go over the middle. He's being told to go over the middle. You saw when Mitch Trubisky played with nothing to lose, he got the ball. He got the ball there, and we've seen Kenny Pickett on occasion get the ball there as well. It's just about needing more time for this group that is very young, and I think it's a big important part of this. This is a young offense with all players that are still trying to figure out how they work together the best. It takes time to do that. So Steelers fans, hang in there. You have until Sunday night to see if they can to go back over it, and then you'll see, did they take steps forward. But before then, we'll have a Wednesday practice report, a Thursday practice report, a Friday practice report. We'll be going over things about your Pittsburgh Steelers, seeing just who does return, because Minkah Fitzpatrick, maybe he comes back from his knee. Maybe they get those cornerbacks back. Maybe those guys come. Maybe Pat Freiermuth comes back. Mike Tomlin hinted at that possibility with the concussion. When does DeMonte KZ come off as injured reserve? There could be a lot of reinforcements coming the Steelers' way. We'll talk about all of that on the Locked On Steelers podcast as the week roll on. We got crossover Thursday tomorrow, so check that out. Mike, thanks so much for joining us, man. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, Chris. You can find me on Twitter at Mike DeFabo. I keep it real simple. And let me just give one quick plug. I did a story on Alex Highsmith, and he's leading the league right now.
Yes, he does.
6.5 sacks right now, leads the entire league. And so I did a story about his grandma, Steen, who passed away, and how he's kind of dedicated the season to her, how she shaped him as a player, and then also just his journey to get to this point. So if you have an opportunity, check that out on The Athletic.
Do check out Mike's work in The Athletic. He's awesome. Him and his partner, Mark Caboli, are breaking it down all the time. Mike, thanks so much for joining me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. You can also read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I recently did a story about how Pitt athletes are getting NIL deals with Dunkin' Donuts and how it's a major partnership. Yeah, it's a really cool story. And not just the major.
How do I get an NIL deal with Dunkin' Donuts?
That's a good question, because they got $500 in store credit and a $750 check just to say, hey, go work for Dunkin' Donuts. That's a pretty good deal. But again, read about that deal and what it's doing for student athletes, not just in football and basketball, but soccer, track and field, women's basketball, everything. There's all sorts of things there. But again, that's all at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Check out this show, Locked On Steelers, on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. Like this video if you saw it on YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes. Again, I'll be back on Thursday with Crossover Thursday. It's going to be Locked On Dolphins. It's going to be a fun one. We'll see you then.